All right, looks like it is going live. Let me move some of this stuff over. So let's see, now streaming. So welcome to Friday afternoon. This is the 34th or 35th day of March 2020. It's Groundhog's Day all over again. I'm joined by my friend Nick Freshman, who I'll introduce more in a second. But for those of you that haven't tuned in to any of these co-videos before, this stems out of the fact that, first of all, and I'm an extrovert, I got to be talking to friends and figure out what's going on. But more importantly, just like I learned how to be an Army officer from talking to sergeants, NCOs, and bosses in the Army, just like I learned how to build my company, Ride Scout, by talking to other entrepreneurs about how they built it, I immediately, upon COVID starting to shut things down, started to reach out to friends and colleagues who I respected to ask their advice on what they were thinking and what they were figuring out. What I realized was the advice I was getting was fabulous. And then I thought, well, with all these technologies and folks moving to Zoom, and frankly, anything written is now outdated in about a week or two. I thought, what better way than to bring folks together, Nick, and just do this real time live. And if people are able to catch it live, great. If not, they can certainly catch it later on if it's of interest. So for those of you that don't know Nick Freshman, if you live in Northern Virginia, I guarantee you've been in and out of one of his establishments over the years. He's leads an organization now called Mother Sauce Partners. I happen to be a fan of Nick, not just because of the cool places he's built along the way when I used to live in Northern Virginia, but also because he was an early investor in Ride Scout, saw us rise through the ranks with all that. And then when we were acquired by Mercedes, we had two success parties, one here in Austin, Texas, but we wanted to return to Arlington for all those friends, family, and investors. And we had it at your place. And I really appreciate it. Yeah, it was a long night. I remember the next day waking up more than I do the night itself because it was a blast, but we have a lot of great photos. So Nick, obviously you represent an industry and the bar and restaurant industry and food in general, hospitality that's been impacted oversized in an outsized way than most other folks are. And I start every discussion talking about the fact that we have at the first tier, those medical professionals and the sick that are on the front lines. Second tier are those people that are out of work or found themselves immediately out of work. And then thirdly are those small business owners or entrepreneurs that are trying to hold it together. The big companies have enough cash on hand. I think they'll be okay in the short to midterm. But you, in many ways, represent all three of those tiers of people in your companies that have been impacted, those that are healthcare providers that still need food and rest, those that are in your industry that have either been laid off or temporarily furloughed, and then you yourself trying to keep the trains running. So this is going to be a fascinating discussion. It's only going to last about 20, 30 minutes, depending on how deep we want to go. But let's start first of all with how you're doing, family and whatnot, and how safe folks are. And then let's really try to help the audience understand what's happening to your industry in all aspects. Take it anywhere you want.
Sure. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. I think quickly, some of the things you resonated about the need to do this, being an extrovert, you can imagine, I didn't get in this business because I don't like people. My wife has been describing me lately as sort of a bear trapped in a cage in the house. And so this is a great opportunity for me as well. And I think that people all across my industry are really feeling this aching need to reconnect with people. And I think that in some ways, and we can get to this later, that is also what's going to bring us back, bring our industry back. But I'm well. My family is well. Those around me that are well. And frankly, I'm lucky. I'm watching my businesses, crash, and I don't know if they're going to come back. And I'm right now doing this inside a new restaurant that we were planning to open in April, and I honestly have no idea when it's going to open. I can say that genuinely, or if. I believe it will, but you don't know. And so despite all of that, I'm one of the lucky ones. And I could sum it up by saying, a couple of weeks ago, I had the worst day of my career. I had to lay off 40 people in a day, and it was awful. But I wasn't one of the ones being laid off. And I think that, trying to keep that perspective and trying to sort of be there for the teams that need me, the portfolio companies that need me, and I think the industry that could use, my help and to the small extent I'm able to give it, it helps keep me really focused. But this is tough. I think if you want to really understand what's going on in our business, I think you should just take two very simple statistics. Assume that every restaurant that you know in this country has lost 90% of their sales.
Wow.
And over 90% of the employees in this business have been laid off. It changes a little bit here and there. For every restaurant that's adapting to a to-go model, there's 3 more restaurants that have already said they're not coming back. So I think that if you sort of absorb that, you can start to understand what we're reckoning with and what we're having to deal with. And then, couple that with the fact that it effectively happened in, a couple days.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like that. And we were getting ready to have the best 2 weeks in the history of Spider Kelly's for our 10th anniversary.
Oh, yeah.
We were going to have our 10th anniversary week. We really built something. I mean, 10 years for a bar kind of feels like we did something. And then we were going to go right into St. Patrick's Day and March Madness. And instead we just closed. So the week leading up to that, we were ecstatic. And then 9 days later, the bar was closed. And it's just impossible to even have foreseen, how do you build a contingency plan for that, man?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I don't think you really can, especially in the industry that you work with, which is already low margins, hardworking people, low margins, and then to be cut off that quickly. So there's a lot of different areas I want to take these questions. So let me take one category first, which is your teammates, the 90% that you had to lay off because the revenue was just not there. What are the things you saw some of them doing? What are the resources that are out there? Are any of them doing anything particularly innovative or clever to be able to help them make ends meet? What's generally happening right now with those folks that have been laid off?
I think that one thing that's great about our business is we have a resiliency, and coupled with an unbelievable sense of hospitality. So we, in the same way that the people that are in our business for life do it because they genuinely like taking care of people, serving people, they immediately pivoted and started trying to serve each other. And we're also really tough and scrappy. And so within days, these grassroots things started mushrooming, where resources were becoming available. So I've seen extraordinary communication streams, trying to get information out to employees about what resources they can turn to. In Washington, here where I am in DC, we've seen a lot of great organizations pop up where restaurants have turned themselves into essentially pantries and soup kitchens for people who work in the restaurant business. And then you have these broadline large food suppliers saying, look, I got all this food I can't sell to anybody. If you can cook it, I'll drop it off. And then somebody else says, well, I don't have a job anymore. Like, I could deliver it. And then it's like, well, let's add a wellness component to it. Let's do yoga classes. Let's do, mental health counseling and package all of this together. And I've seen, these amazing people in my business create this from nothing in days. And then the community has rallied as well. And I think the one thing that we were able to do was really effectively communicate, the statistics I just told you and a lot of that information, and really just trying to tell people, look, it is not a given that the neighborhood restaurant that you love, that restaurant row, or that city that's known for its restaurants, none of that is a given that it will be here. Yeah. So take that in, and then what can you do? You can buy gift cards, you can order to go, you can donate to individual, well, your favorite restaurant invariably has a relief fund set up. You can donate to that. And so that started happening.
Yeah. And now, are there any, so here locally in Austin, there are a couple different sites that people have been using to donate. And I'm sure in the Northern Virginia, DC area, there's some. Is there kind of a national attempt, or is it basically just 50 different approaches? Are you seeing anything from the new CARES Act that came out? Have you even had a chance really to even dive into that? What do you see?
Oh yeah, we've been all over it. Yeah. I think that most, this is an industry that's, I think, 70-something% small businesses, right? Even though it's 4% of the GDP. So in that way, it's all kind of small and local. And I think the best way for people to help is also small and local. So like I said, your favorite restaurant probably has a GoFundMe. And then locally, we've seen some regional support networks pop up where, the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington, you can go to that website and get information as to how to support and sign a petition. I've told people, look, buy a gift card to a restaurant, but sign a petition. And I think that the petition signing, and I think the megaphone that some of our, we have these celebrity chefs in our business, and some of them, like I think of Chef Tom Colicchio, Chef Jose Andres, have used their megaphones and pointed it right at Congress and said, we need the help first. We need it now. We need it yesterday. We're already dying. Our people are already hurting. We need it immediately. And I think that made it into the CARES Act. I think that the grant for small businesses was heavily influenced by what we did. And I also think in that CARES Act is some pretty aggressive unemployment relief, which, is a great resource for the people in our business that have been laid off to know that they can kind of sign up for that quickly, that it's a relatively, reasonable compensation to sort of keep their lives going while we try to hold on to our businesses and then bring them back. So the CARES Act is something. It's not enough and it won't last long enough, but it's a start. And it is something that we've been really trying to educate everyone else in our business. Okay, here's how you sign up. Go talk to your bank. Here's the paperwork. Here's what you need. Let's be ready, because we all know, there's only one bucket, when it's gone, it's gone. We don't know when the next one's coming, nobody knows.
Well, so that leads to the third set of questions I want to get into, which is, in addition to being an owner operator, you're also an investor. So you're looking at other companies.
Yeah.
What advice might you have for those businesses that are suddenly realizing that their current business model has been shattered? Is there time to pivot? Are you seeing consolidation? What advice do you have for them?
So right now, my advice has been very simple. And it's been repeated over and over and over again, which is, do whatever you need to do now to make sure that you still have a business on the other side of this, period. And that involves invariably gut-wrenching choices. Laying your staff off, not paying yourself, playing shell game with creditors. You're in many cases going to have to get really scrappy, and it's going to get really painful. But if you don't make those choices now and you don't hold on to your cash now, and at the end of this, you don't have a business, then what does it matter that you didn't take the steps you needed to take? And these are excruciating decisions. They also involve managing your own sense of your personal safety and the personal safety of the people that work for you. Yeah. Those are very real decisions that people are grappling with. And so my advice is, do whatever you need to do to make sure you have a business, and pretend like this is going to go on indefinitely. Because we don't know. Save your cash for 4 weeks doesn't mean anything. Could be 6 months. And that's what makes this so difficult. But, that's really been my advice. And then, the optimist in me says, if we can do that and we can come out the other side, there is a legitimate chance for a incredible boom period in the restaurant business, because people are going to be so sick of eating in their house. They're going to be dying.
Yes.
How long do you and I want to do this if there's a chance that you and I could do this in person? Yeah. I'll get on a plane to Austin, man, just to kind of see you and, see some of our other buddies. And I think that need that people have is so strong and can't be quieted. And there is no business better at facilitating that than ours. It is what our business is built on. And there is nobody better to help people reconnect physically and in many ways than our business. Yeah. We just have to survive to the other side. And then there is a scenario where the outlook looks really good. Maybe it's changed. I think our models are are changing very quickly now. And I don't know what it will look like afterwards, but I believe very firmly that people will always want to go out to share a meal together.
Well, I just captured that quote of yours in the comment section, which is, we just need to survive to the other side. I think that's great advice. It reminds me of a joke that I heard or was flying around Facebook or wherever it was. Someone said, I'll pay anybody $100 right now to drive up to my house, stand out on the sidewalk and ask me if I want a table of 1 or 2, or would I like any
Right.
order before. Like, they just miss that idea. And
Yeah.
I saw another meme going around that said, what I wouldn't give right now for a Mexican restaurant dinner. So, but let's turn back to one point you said, though, about safety, about keeping yourself safe, your staff safe. I've only seen this mentioned one time, but then again, I'm not in your industry. That's why I'm talking to you now. Is there a discussion about getting, for those businesses that are still trying to do takeout and delivery, about getting the testing kits to the food folks preparing the food and folks delivering the food, making that a priority? Because that would be horrible if we have a restaurant that is essentially spreading it to every person they're serving.
Yeah, I mean, so I haven't. In fact, I can't say it's ever come up, and I'm in regular communication with a lot of people. And I think that my guess is that the reason is that everybody in this country is still effectively sort of at the back of the line when it comes to testing, because we don't have any testing, right? I mean, it's sort of a separate conversation, but if you want to ask me how long we're going to be in this, I'm like, I don't know. Tell me what the problem is first. And we don't know. We don't have the testing, so we don't have that baseline. And so I think that while our industry is on the front line, like you said earlier, the number one are the healthcare workers and the people that are really in it, and all the resources need to go to them and go to the sick. But I do think that there is a case to be made that those of us that are left in this sort of quasi-essential business, I mean, I honestly sorry?
Oh, you're very essential. I wouldn't even say quasi-essential.
Well, I mean, I think you could say, you could make a case. I mean, this is arguing against my self-interest in a sense, but you could make a case that a grocery store is probably more essential than a to-go restaurant, right? In terms of what's operating now. I'm not defining that. But anyways, I think testing for all of us folks, those folks, would be great. And I think that, a restaurant really has to wrestle with, is it worth it to do to go, to create vectors out of my own staff who eventually have to go home to their families? Are they using public transit to get here? Are they driving? What are the procedures that we're taking? And that's very real. I would like to point this out because I think it's really important for people to understand. Restaurants are in many ways very well suited to manage very safe procedures for food handling, for clean surfaces, for all of that stuff. You are a hell of a lot better off coming into my restaurant to pick up to-go food than you are going to Target to get toilet paper, because restaurants are regularly inspected. We are all trained to prevent against the spread of illness, not just foodborne illness. But we are used to cleaning our surfaces. We are used to doing all this stuff. We wash our hands constantly. Those signs that you see in every bathroom are there for a reason, and they're real, and we're regularly inspected. So the restaurants that I know that I'm close to that are participating in this are taking every step possible and following all the guidelines to make sure that the transactions are happening in a safe manner. But, no guarantees.
Yeah, well, so we had Scott Cooperstown join in. He's basically said he had to close his diner down. Just the risk wasn't worth it. He couldn't do it. Dan Morgan, another friend of mine that you may know, he was Virginia transplant now to Austin, is just talking about the fact that we just don't know how long necessarily some people might stay away from restaurants. But I'm going to tell you, I err on the side that you do, which is that restaurants, more than most other social or communal places, like you say, retail shopping, do keep things clean. And so for me, the pent up extrovert, there was another great meme, my wife's an introvert, Amy's an introvert, I'm an extrovert. And it basically said to the introverts, look out for your extroverts. They're just not doing well because they've been pent up.
Right. So, quickly, I would like to say that one of those gentlemen brings up a really interesting point, which is that our industry is just as concerned about the fear and anxiety surrounding this as the actual disease. So when our industry gets hurt, it's not always the snowstorm or the economic downturn or the hurricane. It's the fear of that kind of immediately keeps people away. Like people just run and buy toilet paper and milk and just hunker down. This is an extraordinary amplification of that. But we're very concerned that there will be a significant lag between, okay, the government says it's safe to go out, and people are going to be like, oh, well, I've got a lot of reason to trust the government right now, and my own personal anxiety, and et cetera, et cetera. So that is a very real concern for us. That would hinder or slow down that kind of surge I was talking about. But customers have to feel safe. They have to feel comfortable and ready to join us. And we have to feel comfortable opening up our restaurants and bringing in dozens of staff who work close together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, the good news is you are thinking about your employees first. You're thinking about the community and customers second for rightful reasons in that order. And if restaurateurs and owners of bars and owner operators and food handlers, if they all have that same attitude, then we're going to be just fine, because risk of sickness or disease or problems are already common in society. And you all have really been on the front lines trying to protect people from that in the food handling business. My hope coming out of this is that we just have a lot better general hygiene and practices that might be something we can work on too. And that'll help.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll try to remember in the comment section here before we end to put in a link to a PBS special called How We Got to Now. And it was the history of clean. And in fact, it was in London with the spread of cholera. People thought cholera was spread by the air. They didn't realize it was in the water until they realized that it was the brewery next door to where so many people were being killed. They were being killed because they were drinking the water. Everybody working in the brewery was drinking the beer, which was safer. So there's a silver lining for you.
Stay safe, drink beer.
Exactly. So as we wrap up here at the end, what are some thoughts of anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to share with people when it comes to the hospitality industry or bars and restaurants in general, as we look to not only get through this period, but the recovery on the other end? Fire away.
I mean, I feel like we covered a lot, and I really appreciate the forum and the opportunity to kind of speak for a lot of the folks in my business that can't speak for themselves. So I would try and leave with this. Anyone who's not in the business, just continue to try and appreciate what is happening and realize that, the restaurants are so important because, as I said, the 2020 predictions was 900 billion in revenue for this country. It's going to fall a little bit short of that this year, but that's a big number. We're a significant portion of our GDP. We, employ 15 million people, but fundamentally, we are also so critical to this society because we are what makes up our society, right? When you describe, why you love your neighborhood, why you love your town, why you love where you went to vacation, invariably you are going to mention a restaurant, or a bar or a coffee shop. We are woven in so deeply into our culture that we are almost taken for granted that we'll always be there. And I would just urge people to realize that this is an existential threat to us. And the result could be that a lot of us are not there. And so keep that in mind, sign a petition, pay attention, follow some of the famous chefs on Twitter or Facebook. They'll give you all the information you need to know and learn about what's happening, because there are some small ways that you all can help and get us back to the point where you get to go back out to your favorite restaurant, your favorite bar, and I get to come down and see you and have a couple beers.
Exactly. So what a perfect note to end on, as we do all, reminding folks that the first line are those caregivers, the healthcare workers, and the sick that are on the front line of this. Second are those that have immediately been laid off or furloughed. And then third are the business owners that are trying to stitch it together. And that's why I knew I was going to enjoy this conversation with you, because you're literally there in all three layers. You're providing the food to those caregivers and healthcare workers. You are experiencing an amazing number of layoffs in your industry. And then thirdly, many of you and your peers are trying to hold and stitch this together, probably unlike few industries or sectors that are out there impacting all of them. And you are, as you point out, a inseparable part of the fabric of the country. Every bar and every restaurant, they're in every song and every country music ballad ever sung. And I look forward to the day when you're not only back open for business, but I'm hopefully sitting next to you enjoying that beer. So Nick, thanks for taking the time. I'm going to transfer all this over into LinkedIn as well. If there are other people that you want to tag to point this out, or some of the websites you mentioned, or the famous celebrity chefs, please help spread the word. And I look forward to talking to you in person in the near future. Take care, Nick.
Thanks for the opportunity. Stay safe.
You too.
All right.